It was 1:30 a.m. Air Transfer Flight 236 was flying over the Atlantic Ocean from Toronto to Lisbon in pitch darkness. More than 4 hours had passed since the plane took off and everything was normal on the plane until that time. But suddenly, in the cockpit, a warning came to the pilot. It was a warning that made the hairs on his neck stand up. This warning was that the plane was running out of fuel. Flight 236 had run out of fuel in the air at an altitude of 39,000 feet in the middle of the ocean. Seeing the fuel running out, the pilots were shocked because they were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and there was no sign of land in the distance. This meant that now the pilots had only one option, and that was to drown in the Atlantic Ocean with the 293 passengers on board, which was almost certain. There was. But in the meantime, something strange happened to the plane, which was quite surprising. What happened to Air Transfer Flight 236 at an altitude of 39,000 feet in the middle of the ocean? In today's video, you will know that. So, let's start this interesting video today without further delay. Feli, this story begins on August 23, 2001, at 8:52 p.m. local time from Toronto Pearson International Airport in Canada. An air transfer airline Airbus A330 took off from Toronto, Canada, to Lisbon, Portugal. It was a 7-hour non-stop flight. The flight was carrying 293 passengers, 2 pilots, and 13 crew members. Before takeoff, the plane was loaded with about 469 metric tons of fuel, which was 4.5 tons more than required. The plane was piloted by 48-year-old Captain Robert Peace and 28 years old. First Officer Dirk de Egger. Captain Peace had about 16,800 hours of flying experience, of which 796 hours were spent on the Airbus A330, while First Officer de Egger had about 4,800 hours of flight experience, of which 386 hours were spent on the Airbus A330, which meant that both pilots were very experienced. After boarding the passengers, the plane took off at 8:02 p.m. local time, and within a few minutes the plane reached an altitude of 39,000 feet in the air, which was its cruising altitude. After takeoff, the plane went straight. Everything was normal on the plane until it crossed the Atlantic Ocean and landed in Lisbon. Since it was night, most of the passengers were asleep by then, and the crew members and pilots had nothing special to do. It looked like this for 4 hours. The plane is now over. It was almost in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Suddenly, at 1:30 a.m., Captain Robert noticed an unusual reading in the cockpit. After some time, an error also started showing. That error was high oil pressure, low oil quantity, and low oil temperature. Now this kind of long. In such a situation, such minor errors were normal in non-stop flights. In such a situation, the pilots would fix them themselves or with the help of a crew member while sitting in the cockpit. But the error that was seen on this air transfer airline flight was not normal. Both the captain and the first officer were full of Airbus A330s. They had experience, but they had never seen anything like this in their entire careers. Due to this, both of them were confused as to what this error actually was. Without seeing any way, they opened the flight manual and tried to find out about this error, but the flight manual also did not have any information about it. Now, if the pilots wanted, they could have ignored this error. But it is clear that any pilot would not want to take any risk in the middle of the ocean with a flight full of passengers, which is why Captain Peace contacted the Air Transfer Maintenance Control Center to find out about this. But the surprising thing was that the maintenance team also did not know anything about this, but the maintenance team advised the pilots to keep an eye on it and try to find out about it as soon as possible. After a long time, the pilots also relaxed and believed that this error might have been caused by a faulty sensor, which was very normal. But exactly half an hour after this incident, at 1:36 a.m., another warning came in front of the pilots, and this warning was a fuel imbalance. Actually, in every plane, the fuel in both wings is divided equally, but sometimes the fuel in one wing goes up and down a little, so then the imbalance warning starts coming in the cockpit. However, the pilots did not worry much about this problem, because the pilots could have fixed this problem from the cockpit, and the pilots just did it. The fuel was low, so they transferred fuel from the left wing to the right wing, and somehow they solved this problem, but they did not know that while transferring fuel they had done something which was going to bring a big danger for them. After the transfer, a problem started which shocked the pilots. Actually, after the fuel transfer, the oil temperature in the number 2 engine of the plane started decreasing and the oil pressure started increasing. The pilots now understood the importance of the matter and became a little serious because the plane was. It was right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and there was no sign of land for a long distance, due to which the pilots were very nervous and started looking for an airport to land the plane. The nearest airport was Lodges Air Base, located in the Azores island of Portugal. The pilots immediately contacted the airport authorities and asked for permission for an emergency landing, and after a while they received permission. Then they quickly turned the plane towards Agres without further delay, but in the meantime Captain Peace learned that the fuel was decreasing by 1 gallon per second, and now they had only 7 tons of fuel left with which the plane could take off in just half an hour, and the Lodges airport was still 280 kilometers away from them, meaning they did not even have the fuel to reach Lodges. Nevertheless, they did not give up and somehow tried to reach Lodges. But the situation became even worse when at 2:13 a.m. the number 2 engine on the right wing of the plane caught fire, and seeing this scene, the pilot almost lost consciousness because the plane now had only 1 engine left and that 2 had very little fuel left. But anyway, the reality was that 1 engine was now the last support of the plane. To fly the plane on 1 engine now, the captain brought the plane down from an altitude of 39,000 feet to an altitude of 33,000 feet. The fuel was still decreasing rapidly. The pilots thought that there was a leakage somewhere. Maybe. So they tried to find the leakage, but due to darkness they could not find it. In the meantime, the maintenance unit of the plane contacted them and advised them to bring the plane from 33,000 feet to 20,000 feet so that if there was any leakage, it could also be detected. The pilots could not take such a risk now, because if the plane had descended so low at once and the leakage could not be detected, then even if they wanted to, they would not have been able to return to that height, and they would have been forced to land the plane in the sea, and immediately the entire plane would have sunk into the sea. So they could not obey the maintenance unit, and without taking any risk they remained at 33,000 feet because the pilots believed that they could reach Lodges Air Base with 1 engine. On the other hand, the airline authorities had made full preparations on the runway. So that there was no risk during the landing of the plane was now slowly moving towards Lodges Airport. At that time the number 1 engine of the plane also caught fire. Along with that, it was also confirmed that there must be a leakage somewhere in the plane, but now even after being confirmed, it was of no use because both the engines of the plane were now damaged. As soon as the engine was damaged, the electricity supply of the entire plane was stopped, due to which all the passengers in the plane were very scared, but with the help of the ram air turbine, there was still enough electricity in the cockpit to power the necessary equipment. The plane could go on. The plane had now descended from a height of 33,000 feet to an altitude of 30,000 feet, and now the plane started gliding. Here, by gliding the plane, we mean that when any plane covers a vertical distance, it covers the horizontal distance in the same ratio. Covering, and each plane has its own glide ratio, so the Airbus A330 had a glide ratio of 15:1. Meaning that this plane descended 1 foot for every 15 feet it moved forward, and now the distance between the largest airport and the plane was only 121 kilometers, which could be covered by gliding, but at that time, another. The problem came when the plane glided so close to the island of Agres that now there was only 15 kilometers between the plane and the island. But the problem was that the plane was still at an altitude of 20,000 feet, and if the pilot tried to land the plane from such an altitude, then the plane would have had a high chance of crash landing, due to which the pilot contacted the air traffic control. The air traffic control advised the pilot to perform a 360-degree turn before landing, and the pilot did just that and made the plane circle, i.e. 360 degrees. A circle due to which the plane descended from an altitude of 20,000 feet to an altitude of 5,000 feet, but this altitude was also not safe for landing, so the pilots made the plane perform several S-turns, due to which the plane descended to an altitude of 2,000 feet, and the plane was at the perfect altitude for landing. The pilots now brought the plane to the runway at Lodges Air Base, but this kind of landing was not without danger because immediately after landing, 8 of the plane's 12 wheels were completely locked and the plane's speed was so high 370 kilometers per hour. Due to the speed, the plane immediately touched the runway and then started moving forward on the runway. After traveling about 2,300 meters, the plane stopped. By that time, most of the plane's tires had burst, but due to the caution of the airport crew, the plane was saved from a major accident. The passengers had started running a lot inside the plane during landing, due to which about 14 passengers and 2 crew members suffered minor injuries, but none of them suffered any major damage. Later, Air Transfer Airlines Flight 236 lost its engine and crashed into the ground. The longest in history. It was the first plane to glide for a distance of 121 kilometers, so it is also called the Azores glider. After the incident, the Portuguese Aviation Investigation Department or GPIA investigated and found that before takeoff, maintenance workers installed a wrong part in the plane's hydraulic system. Because of which, shortly after takeoff, the part was damaged and fuel leakage started, which caused both engines of the plane to burn. Air Transfer was found guilty in this incident, so the Canadian government imposed a fine of approximately 250,000 Canadian dollars on the company, and Airbus also made necessary changes to all its planes in the future so that such problems do not occur again. So friends, this was today's video. Do let us know how you liked the video by commenting. If you liked it, be sure to like it. We will regularly watch such interesting and informative videos. Strange. Thanks everyone.